Long before stadium lights and television deals, football was a brutal, disorganized brawl. In medieval Europe, crowds of men would clash in the mud and water, wrestling, kicking, and dragging an inflated pig's bladder across town. These matches often pulled in hundreds of people, sprawling across entire villages without any fixed borders or time limits. It was an anarchic, seasonal ritual. As the Industrial Revolution multiplied factories across Britain, populations surged into dense urban centers. This created a defined working class that suddenly had specific, scheduled leisure hours on weekends. Simultaneously, the invention of the steam railway shrank the country. Young men from distant industrial towns and elite boarding schools could hop on a train and challenge each other on the pitch. But when these newly connected opponents stepped onto the same field, arguments erupted immediately. One town might play a game that allowed catching the ball, while another permitted players to kick their opponents in the shins. No one agreed on how to actually play. To survive the leap from isolated villages to a connected industrial society, football had to resolve these local clashes and forge a single, universal set of laws. The fiercest physical conflicts broke out over two specific actions: carrying the ball by hand and a practice known as hacking, where players would intentionally kick their opponents in the shins to bring them down. To force some order, representatives from several clubs met in a London tavern in 1863 to form the Football Association, or the FA. They drew up a strict code that formally outlawed both handling the ball and hacking, officially splitting their game away from what would become rugby. The FA didn't go unchallenged. In the industrial North, the working-class Sheffield Football Club had spent years developing its own set of rules. They agreed with London on a strict kicking game. The Bear version contained crucial tactical elements the FA lacked. While London debated how to physically handle the ball, Sheffield's rulemakers invented the corner kick. They also introduced the concept of awarding a free kick to penalize foul play. This diagram illustrates how the two codes finally merged in 1877. After a decade of stubborn rivalry, the FA agreed to adopt Sheffield's dead ball innovations in exchange for Sheffield accepting the FA's ban on handling. The unified laws of the game grew out of a series of regional power struggles, ending only when both factions prioritized a shared national standard over their local traditions. That compromise covered the rules of play, but the physical field itself was still undefined. Early regulations stated that the goalposts had to be exactly 8 yards apart, but they mandated absolutely nothing about a top boundary. Looking at this representation of an early goal frame, you can see the problem. A player could kick the ball 20 or 30 feet into the air right between the posts and claim a valid goal. Opponents would furiously argue it was too high, leading to what were known as ghost goals. To physically cap the goal and silence the arguments, officials ran a piece of tape between the posts starting in 1866. By 1882, a solid wooden crossbar became mandatory, clearly defining the scoring box you see here. Yet even a rigid crossbar didn't stop the shouting matches over whether a fast-moving ball had actually crossed the plane. To provide undeniable physical proof, organizers finally made goal nets a regular requirement in 1892. Even the shape of the posts caused friction. Scottish teams clung to square wooden posts, which frequently caused hard shots to deflect outward. After decades of complaints regarding unfair bounces, square posts were outlawed in 1887 in favor of the elliptical, rounded aluminum frames used today. Every piece of physical equipment bounding the modern pitch, the goal net, the rigid crossbar, the rounded posts, was invented specifically to eliminate human debate and reliably settle the score. With the rules and boundaries locked in, a final dispute threatened to break the sport apart: money. Wealthy clubs in the south of England insisted that football remain an amateur pursuit, played purely for the love of the sport, but the game was exploding in the industrial north. The men filling the rosters of those northern clubs were factory workers and laborers. They simply could not afford to abandon a Saturday shift at the mill to travel for a match, unless they were compensated for lost wages. Desperate to field the best teams and beat their southern rivals, northern clubs began secretly slipping cash to their star players. When this illicit payroll was exposed, it caused a massive scandal. Facing a permanent fracture between the wealthy amateurs and the working-class professionals, the FA made a reluctant concession in 1885. They officially legalized paying players to play football. To sustain those newly legal wages, clubs needed reliable revenue. In 1888, a club executive named William McGregor solved this by founding the Football League, a system of guaranteed, scheduled fixtures that ensured steady ticket sales week after week. This 1888 league schedule turned a volatile pastime into a predictable professional industry. By standardizing match times and guaranteeing a steady flow of paid labor, the sport adopted the same mechanical reliability required by the factories surrounding the pitch. From lawless brawls and medieval waterways, the sport evolved into highly organized spectacles hosted in massive stadiums and governed by universal, heavily enforced laws. The 90-page rulebook, a precisely engineered crossbar, and the multi-million-dollar player contracts are all surviving artifacts of bitter 19th-century arguments over how the game should work. The sport achieved global dominance by successfully codifying its early chaos into a universal system that could reliably settle its most divisive disputes.